Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Process of Selecting the Right Safety Button Vendor, sponsored by TraknProtect. I'm Victoria Schaefer, HFTP Senior Membership Manager, along with Barbara Sommarero, HFTP Chapter Relations Coordinator, and Parminder Batra, co-founder and CEO of TraknProtect. Before we begin today's presentation, I have a few housekeeping items. First, we are using the question and answer icon at the bottom of your screen and not the chat feature. Please feel free to post your questions to our speakers. On the upper right hand of your screen, there are several options to view today's webinar. If you choose to show only the slide deck and the speaker, then please note that you can adjust the presentation area by dragging the vertical bar in either direction. Attendee contact information will be provided to our sponsor. Today's discussion centers on what our panelists look for in a safety button, what their selection process was, and what their priorities were in balancing regulatory and brand requirements along with hotel needs. Panel members are Dan Phillips, Technical Advisor to White Lodging, Bruce Retsky, Senior Manager, Networks and Desktops at IHG, and Iris Junge, CRME, General Manager at the Allegro Royal Sonesta. I'm pleased to introduce our moderator for today, the co-founder and CEO of TraknProtect, Parminder Batra. TraknProtect is the 2019 Judges Award winner for the HFTP E20X competition. TraknProtect provides hotels with enhanced safety solutions that comply with local laws and union requirements for safety buttons, while also automating operational processes such as inventory tracking, room tray tracking, and vendor tracking, providing hotels with peace of mind of protecting its employees while increasing efficiency and productivity on a single intuitive platform. TraknProtect's inclusive software platform provides the value of real-time location technology, business analytics, and reporting to provide each property with unique insights. TraknProtect is not only solving problems for hotels, but also having a real impact on employee safety in the hospitality sector. I now hand the webinar over to you, Parminder.
Thank you, Victoria. That was so great. It's great to hear about our company from through someone else. And I hope everyone can see our superwoman there. We are a woman-owned, woman-operated company. We're very proud of our superhero. So talking about superheroes, I'm joined by superheroes that have selected TraknProtect as their provider for safety buttons. And we're talking about, one of the conversations that came up as we talk was, how did you select this? And I think it's critical for hotel owners and operators to understand what's the process that others have gone through. So I'm joined by Iris, and to introduce Iris, Iris is originally from Germany, and hang on, I'm so sorry. And Iris has been with Allegro for the last 9 years. She has over 20 years of hospitality experience, having worked with Sonesta, Kimpton, Wyndham, Hard Rock, Starwood, IHG, pretty much every brand out there. Her experience spans from housekeeping management to front office and rooms operations. And right now she is overseeing 483-room hotel here at Kimpton Allegro in Chicago. And she's also a member of the IHLA Women in Lodging chapter. Welcome, Iris.
Thank you. I'm excited to be with you guys today.
Thank you. And we're also joined by Dan Phillips. Dan will tell you the story about how he and I met over breakfast many years ago at High Tech. But Dan began his hospitality career in 1987. And then in 1991, he started his own consulting firm. And since that time has offered technology-related services to hotels, management companies, hotel brands around the world. And for the last 5 years, he's been a technical advisor to White Lodging. Dan, they are lucky to have you. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much.
And Bruce and I've been working with IHG. I met Bruce when he first started looking at safety buttons, and we started chatting. And he's a dear friend and agreed to join the panel. He's been in the hotel business since 1985. So he said that's since 36 years maybe. Started as the night auditor and then moved into accounting and technology for the last 30 years. Started his career at Crowne Plaza, Addison, Texas. And I think you're based out of Atlanta now. and moved to Bristol Hotels and Resorts corporate offices in 1990. And then when IHG purchased Bristol, that's when Bruce moved to Atlanta, and he's been working with safety buttons since 2019. So, and had a huge hand in selection of the vendors for IHG preferred status. So welcome, Bruce.
Thank you.
So before we start, I'm going to have turn it over to each one of the panelists. If you could, for all the attendees, just so that they know they've met you, who are you with, what's your role, and your extent of your involvement in selecting the safety button vendor. So Iris, can we start with you?
Sure. I'm actually with the now Royal Sonesta Allegro. It used to be a Kimpton hotel. That's when we implemented the safety buttons. As Parminder said, I've been there for 9 years. And I am ultimately, when we implemented the button, I was, I believe, either the rooms director or the assistant general manager. I can't even recall, but you know, certainly was very involved in selecting it, even though you know, direction was given, but overseeing, you know, front office and housekeeping in particular. You know, it was really important to me to be involved and truly understand all the different options that are out there and what would be the best solution for our hotel, in particular being such a large hotel, because that oftentimes with technology really presents a different challenge than, you know, having 100 or 200 rooms.
And I think Iris, candidly, you had gone with another vendor initially, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. And also, I think one of the key requirements, if I recall, was you wanted to make sure it fit in with the day-to-day operations of the housekeepers and not creating additional steps. I remember we had conversations around that, about how it had to be operationally be easy to fit. So that's
Yes.
great. Dan, could you introduce your role and the extent of your involvement with safety buttons?
Sure. As stated, I work with White Lodging. White Lodging is a owner-operator manager of hotels, primarily the Marriott flag, but also with Hiltons and Hyatts. I'm a technical advisor to them, have been working for just coming up on 5 years now. Part of what I do is looking for new technologies and solutions, sometimes to meet legislation, sometimes to meet brand requirements, sometimes to meet owner requirements. You know, the same operations that probably our other panelists do as well. My role in safety buttons was basically from the beginning to take a look at all the different vendors that were out there, narrow that down to about 4 at the time. Took a look at everything from the technology to business models to strategies for deployment and things along those lines. And along with another colleague, we were the final decision makers on what we wanted to roll out with. We did go opt to go with TraknProtect for our owned properties. And some of our third-party owners have done some TraknProtect, but some other vendors as well. So I've had experience working with a couple others in addition to TraknProtect.
That's great. That's fabulous. And Bruce, last but not least, you've been with IHG. I just noted Dan did not mention any IHG in his portfolio. I think we need to talk to him about that. But tell us about your role and the extent of your involvement.
Yeah, so currently my current title is manager of our Tier 3 escalation and support services for IHG. IHG is kind of split and split our technology group into 2 different roles. And about 3 years ago, I was asked to start up this new role for escalations and Tier 3 services for all of our hotels. And basically that includes any and all technology in the hotels. For IHG specifically, the majority of our hotels are franchise hotels, and we primarily support their PMS systems, their GR systems, et cetera. But as many of you know, there could be up to 30 or 40 different systems in a hotel. And we get a lot of calls on a lot of different systems, even though IHG does not particularly support all of those 30 or 40 different systems. However, we still get calls on them, and they are our hotel, so we have to help them to the best of our ability. We do a lot of vendor management, et cetera. Back in 2019, when the safety buttons first started to become popular in the hotel space, I was asked to kind of lead the role on selecting some vendors, just learn more about it, because at the time we knew nothing about it. I didn't know anything about it. So I started doing some research, started making phone calls, vendors started reaching out to me, et cetera. And that's when I met Parminder and team. And I would say to date, I must have talked to about 25 or 30 different vendors. At the time, before we selected our 6 approved vendors, we had talked to about 15 vendors or so. And we had extensive face-to-face interviews with these vendors. We've looked at their products. I think Parminder, you came out to our corporate offices maybe 2 or 3 times, talking with numerous people, et cetera. And it was a difficult choice at first, with so many different vendors after looking at 15 or so different vendors. And then we narrowed it down to the 6 that we chose. And we're pleased, very pleased with the 6 that we chose. I know TraknProtect is in many of our hotels now, so excited about that. Yeah. And overall, it's been great working for the last few years on this.
That's great. And so for the attendees, as you can see, you know, Iris, Dan, Bruce bring such different and diverse backgrounds and experiences to the table. And so I do want to make today's webinar to be interactive, not like other webinars. We want to have candid conversations here. We're going to ask questions. I've got questions I'll be asking, but please do put in your questions in here, because we want it to be interactive and we want it to be informative. The session should help you as you're undergoing the process of making your decision. You can see, you know, and it may be a question for Bruce as to looking at the different vendors, 25 vendors. I mean, that's a lot. And what was the process? So we're going to dive in with the questions, but before we do, Barbara, if you wouldn't mind putting up the first polling question. So if the attendees could respond to that, then what we would do is we'll actually have an answer, and we'll be able to make sure the panelists actually are able to answer some of those questions and your responses. So do take a moment and enter that. We'll wait just about a minute, give everyone a minute to enter their responses. And it's just a 3-part question. And the first question is, have you implemented a solution at your hotel? And then if no, what's holding you back? And let me see there. And the third part is, if you've answered yes, are you happy with the solution you have? So just going to give, the attendees are still viewing the questions, the system tells me, so we'll just give everyone a chance to do that, and we'll make the results available to the panelists as soon as we're able to reach that. So if more attendees could respond, that would be great. Sorry, Barbara.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the poll is still open, and oh, I'm covered up. Sorry. I'll go ahead and end the poll now so that we can all see the results. I'm ending the poll, and now I'm going to share the results so that everyone can see. So I'd say for the first question is, oh, go ahead, Parminder, you can go ahead.
Okay, so as we can see, 50-50, you know, of all the attendees, only about 4 people responded. And of the 4, it's 50-50. 2 people have implemented and 2 haven't. And those that have not implemented, they've said that it's due to lack of information or other. Please do put in your question as to what the other is. What is it that's holding you back? And then in terms of those that have implemented, you know, half said yes, half said no. So that's really an interesting bunch. So that gets us started with the questions, and I'm going to then ask the panelists, as to, let's start with Bruce. I'm going to start with you. What were you looking for in a safety button vendor as you did you reviewed 15 to 25, and I think you had two. You broke it up in two, right? I mean, there was a time where you chose 3 and then there was a batch of 3. So you did 3 and 3. So when you were looking at the first 15 vendors to select your first 3 vendors, what were you looking for? And did that requirement change when you selected the second batch of 3?
Right. So I think accuracy is the big thing, because the reason why we're doing this is due to employee safety. And there could be nothing worse than having a situation in room 202, but yet the system signals that there's an incident going on in room 217 or something of that nature. So it was pretty much, it was myself and several others at IHG that spoke with all the vendors and looked at all the different solutions out there. And it was pretty much unanimous. Accuracy had to be the #1 driver of the whole thing. And then in addition to that, just the whole ease of installation, I think, is very important. IHG currently manages and franchises roughly 4,500 hotels here in North America. And in trying to project manage or get that many hotels on a solution, it needs to be an easy solution to deploy. So I think those were our 2 big driving factors. And then obviously costs. Again, this was a new expense to many hotels. It's something that many of the hotels never even heard of. And then when they first heard about the pricing of it, there was some sticker shock tied to it and stuff like that. So I spent a lot of time talking to management companies, ownership groups, et cetera, on explaining exactly what it is, what it does, et cetera. So.
Oh, that's great. So the 3 that I wrote down that you were looking for, just to summarize, is accuracy, ease of install, and cost. Right. Would you say in that order?
Yes. Accuracy, ease of installation, and then pricing. Now, since we're in 2021 now, coming out of a very different 2020, I hate to say this, cost could be the #1 driving factor now.
And that's
I don't like saying that.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
And that's something we're going to come back to. That's a question that I do have for you, a little later, that absolutely, I think, given post-COVID and how hotels have been impacted, your cost is certainly going to be the driver. So Iris, as you're looking at something that we mentioned earlier, is that you had actually chosen to go with a different vendor. So if we could just look at, what were you looking for when you selected that vendor, and how did that change after selecting that vendor? And of course, we're not mentioning names, so please do not. Just looking to learn from each other's experiences here.
Yeah, I mean, initially, when the first vendor that we ultimately never truly installed was chosen, it was more kind of, the corporate push. And I want to say it was probably a more cost-effective solution, but once we got it on property and really looked at it, it just was not, easy to install, easy to work with, or easy to use. That was another factor for me. You have housekeeping room attendants, they're not tech savvy. They in some cases don't speak English. It needs to be very simple, just like with TraknProtect. You have this button, you push it, and that's it. There's no syncing, no other devices. So I think once we said, well, option 1 is just not going to work, so we're back to the drawing board. And here's the things we're looking for: cost, obviously, ease of installment. Looking at, is there equipment that we have in-house already that could support that? And just to keep it easy to manage down the road. You know, it's not just about the installation, but, you know, what's the equipment cost, you know, replacement, things like that is something we considered, you know, when revisiting our choice.
That's great. So more than just an ease of install, as you mentioned, it was the ease of use and the amount of engagement of housekeepers on a day-to-day basis. So again, going to the operational, like how does it fit into the operation, the day-to-day operations? Do they have to pair? Do they have to sync? Do they have to do any troubleshooting throughout the day? And that's important. That's great. And you bring up a really good point, replacement cost. That's something sometimes I think gets overlooked when selecting a vendor, is what happens when we have to replace the equipment, because eventually it'll fail, it'll go missing. So what's the cost implications of that? That's a great point.
I mean, honestly, even, you know, the situation we find ourselves in now, you know, going from 80 room attendants to, I don't even think we have 10 right now, right? So do I have now all this equipment that I'm still paying for, or do I have something that, you know, is going to be cost effective as staffing changes too?
Yeah, and that's, we're going to come back to that one, decreased staff. Dan, I'd love to have you add, you know, what was it in terms of, as you looked at different vendors and you said, you know, you looked at different technologies, and not just that, you're seeing technology from a different perspective, as you've also seen your owners implement other technologies other than TraknProtect. So you have experience in being able to look at it from various perspectives. What were you looking for, and do you think you're getting that with the vendors that you have?
Yeah, I think our two other panelists hit all the home runs already with answering this one. So I'm going to come from a little bit different perspective. I looked a little bit more at business models and the corporation, the people behind it. Yes, cost was important. Yes, ease of use. Yes, deployment strategies were all important. You know, replacement, like we just talked about, all that type of stuff, 5-year, you know, ROIs and all that type of stuff that you do. But one of the things that kind of struck me when I looked comparatively to the various companies that we took a look at was the purpose in mind. I again, no names and stuff like that, but there were companies that I talked to that it was all about the dollar. There was companies that I talked to that were more in line with grabbing market share by lowballing so that they can sell other products later. There were companies that were taking a look at room buttons as an add-on to sell their primary products. So it was a variety of different things, and what was important to me, passion may be too grand of a term, but it was a company, you know, companies that would be passionate about the particular product and the need that it's fulfilling. It was a little bit detracting to me to talk to a company that would say, yes, and we do this too, instead of talking to somebody that says, this is what we do, and we have future plans and R&D to add on to it. You know, so that was a important criteria to me. I know that sometimes that's overlooked, but I'm a believer in partnering. And I think that the vendor and the hotel management, hotel operator, hotel owner entities need to partner, especially, you know, now after COVID and everything else. There's both sides of that coin have sacrificed staff and resources and loss of income, and try to partner together with different financial models. I know that we were talking about reduced staff a little while ago. You know, the ability to reduce monthly recurring charges based upon active staff, active buttons, you know, all that type of stuff is partnering. And I think that when you want to partner, you want to know who you're going to the dance with, and spending a little bit of time getting to know the people and the incentive that they have was as important to me.
Hey, Dan, can I just comment on that real quick?
Absolutely.
So, Dan, you mentioned the word partner, and there is such a big difference between a vendor and a partner. And I'm not going to go into my thoughts on that and stuff like that, but yes, it is so very important. that you're choosing the right partner and not just a vendor to do this.
So Bruce, do you have a story to share where you felt there was a difference? I'm going to put you on the spot there.
Well, yeah, with different technologies.
Again, no names. We do not use other people's.
No, and I can't think of any in the safety button business. Haven't had too many of those challenges there. Certainly in other technologies, I've been doing this for, I don't know, 25, 30 years now. And yes, unfortunately, we have come across quite a few vendors that are just exactly it. And they are, they look out for themselves and only for themselves. And in the long run, it ended up costing them a pretty sizable piece of business. So.
And I think I could speak to that too. You know, it's like, just because it's a bigger company that just covers more ground doesn't necessarily make them better. I think, you know, one of the things I enjoy with TraknProtect is like the local presence and, you know, being or having that partner really, you know, and having the opportunity, if need be, to get somebody on property, and it doesn't cost me an arm and a leg to do that, right?
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you. And certainly we look to be partners with everyone that we engage with, local or national or international, in fact, that we do strive for that. So something I'm going to go back to, Iris, you had mentioned before was the operational. Mm-hmm. So then on that side, how did you then, given, you know, your experience, and then you did select TraknProtect, let's talk about the operational side of things, because fundamentally the users are those that are actually, you know, providing the housekeeping services, and one of the key departments in a hotel. They interact with guests, and it is for their safety. So how did you engage with the different vendors in the process of selecting to make sure that operationally they would fit this time? Because, you know, the first vendor was operationally difficult from ease of use. So then the second time around, how did you what were the questions you asked to make sure they would fit in operationally?
I mean, one of the main things, and very simple, is, you know, what kind of equipment are you giving me? Mm-hmm. You know, is it truly a safety button? Is it, you know, an iPod Touch? You know, how is this being carried around? You know, and together with that, I think, you know, Bruce brought it up earlier, what's the accuracy, right? So, you know, if I now press this device, you know, does it have to sync? And could there be a lag time, or it's going to submit real-time data? You know, and the big piece was it can't be anything big and bulky and difficult to hand out and difficult to carry around, because, you know, my team wouldn't even use it, and say, you know, if you're asking me to, you know, add to that as I'm trying to clean a room, I'm not carrying around, for example, an iPod Touch, you know, just in case of emergency. You know, could it be something that can almost be hidden? Mm-hmm. I would say that was like the things that we really then considered.
Right. And I think one of the key considerations I recall Anthony had asked me about was, you know, how long is the battery life? How do I make sure I don't have to have batteries on site to keep changing them, whether it's for the beacons or the buttons? How do I make sure? Dan, Bruce, anything, you know, operationally that you feel stood out that you wanted to make sure that vendors or your safety button partners made sure that they were efficient in?
One thing that I wanted to comment on was when I first started to use the TraknProtect system, as soon as the button was depressed, you immediate, and when I say immediate, I think it's probably within 3 seconds, all of the staff members that are configured to receive the alerts, they received an alert. It was more at that point, at the 3-second point, we did not know where the alert was coming from, but at least it gave the management staff the heads up that, hey, there's something happening, an alert was just triggered, and it gives them time to wrap up a phone call or finish up an email or something like that. And then within, I think it was 10 or 15 seconds after you got away from your desk, and then you got the first notification as to where the information or where the incident was coming from. And no, I thought that was good. And I don't know if I've seen that in the other in the other systems where you get that first alert at 3 seconds. And again, whether that first alert contained room 202 or not, again, you're not going to get there any quicker. It's just a quick heads up that something's happening, so I can, whatever I'm working on in my brain, I can switch over to my cell phone and focus on that, saying, hey, something's going on in the hotel that takes precedence over any other thing I'm working on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point too. You know, what's the alert situation? You know, it can't just go to my housekeeping manager because that person likely is not just going to sit at a desk. You know, it can't go to security because they may not be in the office. So what's, you know, where's this alert going to for me to ensure that then there is somebody to respond?
Yeah.
I'm going to throw some thoughts on that as well. So as a management company, we have an IT support staff, kind of like even one hotel and ISG does, and things along those lines, but you have limited resources there. So from two different perspectives, from the actual installation, rollout, deployment, so to speak, you know, how much interaction, how much time, human resources are required to interact with a vendor to get the installations done. And then on the flip side is once they're installed, how many tickets, trouble tickets are you getting from your hotels, you know, month after month after month after month? We run a very lean support staff, you know, 24/7, 7 days a week. We're averaging right now around 500 to 600 tickets a month. And you don't want to add, I think I've got probably 40 hotels right now deployed between different systems, maybe more than that. If I got one ticket a month from each one of those hotels, you know, I'm incrementally increasing the amount of time on our IT support. So I think you want something that's easy to install, doesn't take management time to get it done, but ongoing is no tickets. I don't want to deal with problems. You know, I don't want to hear about batteries. I don't want to hear about smashed beacons. I don't want to hear about, you know, somebody who lost this and couldn't get it recovered, and, you know, all those different types of things. So that's, again, maybe back to partnering and stuff like that. I don't hear all that because it's all handled. So that's important to me.
Yeah, and thank you. And we strive for that. I appreciate that, Dan, because we do try to make sure that you don't hear about anything and we handle everything. So that's great. Bruce, it reminded me when we first deployed in Jersey, you went out to the properties, right? That was 4 properties we deployed simultaneously. And when you speak about the alerts and the testing, you actually were on the property testing yourself, and you tested the alerts and the accuracy. So just if we could spend a moment on that, you know, what was that experience like in being able to go to different properties and test for accuracy and sort of, and what you saw?
Right. So at first, if IHG is going to recommend a vendor, it's important that we not necessarily know the product inside and out, but we know that it works the way how it's designed to work. Unfortunately, there's a lot of vendors out there that their product works in a roundabout way. You push a button and yeah, it'll alert you that, hey, on the 2nd floor, something's going on. And that clearly did not meet our standards and stuff like that. So it was important that I physically was able to touch and feel the product and stuff like that. One of the takeaways that I got out of the deploying to several New Jersey hotels was we have a, I'm not going to call it a unique or a proprietary Wi-Fi system in all the hotels, but we have security surrounding our Wi-Fi systems. And as you know, all of your devices that go into the room connect to Wi-Fi. And we did have some challenges with getting those devices up and running on our Wi-Fi network. And again, when you deploy anything technical in technology, I think everybody on this call can agree, there is no such thing as a perfect installation of some sort. So again, I know that, and we know that, and we just have to spread the word that other hotels are just gonna have to expect that. The challenges that we saw were due to the security of our Wi-Fi systems. But again, working with Parminder and her team, as well as our Wi-Fi team, we were able to resolve those issues relatively quickly. And from then on, it was just smooth sailing. And the portal in which they use everything is just extremely user-friendly. And granted, I've been around technology, so I pick up on things a little bit quicker than just a normal a typical hotel person, but the comments that I've heard from the hotels itself is saying, wow, this is easy. So it's just small little things like that gave me the warm fuzzy that we were definitely working with the right vendor.
Oh, that's great. We're happy to hear that. So going back to selection and how you selected. So we talked a lot about that, and we've talked about that, how you selected. How did you've selected a vendor, and now, and you mentioned this, Bruce, that, in terms of having the Wi-Fi, certain Wi-Fi settings done, and sometimes those need to be revisited. But what's the one way that a hotelier who has not implemented a safety button vendor, and it doesn't matter which one they select, how would you recommend that they set that vendor up for success? Because there's one is selection and selecting the right vendor. And let's assume that, everyone's gone through their due diligence. There's also the HTNG Buyer's Guide, by the way, for those that don't know about it, please do look that up. It's available for everyone. And so as you look at the Buyer's Guide, and let's say they've gone through the process, the RFP, or, various demos, selected the vendor, how can a hotel, and Dan, I'll turn this one over to you, how can they make sure that that vendor and that property is set for success?
I think the biggest thing is don't assume that anything is a turnkey solution, in the sense of, when you choose a vendor, you're automatically going to assume that I'm paying this vendor a lot of money, they need to just run with it. Well, especially in this technology, the TraknProtect system, or any of these safety button systems, they're only as good as the technology that they're connecting to, whether it be a Wi-Fi system, whether it be a cellular network, or anything of that nature. So I think it's real important before the deployment, once you select the vendor, and now you're talking about how to get this thing installed, I think it's real important to have several calls with the vendor, with the hotel, with the management company, who's ever responsible for, I guess, overseeing the installation, if you will, and talk through the entire installation. And just by talking through the entire installation, that might come up with some gotchas in advance. Like if you talk about, the staff will go on site, or the TraknProtect staff will go on site, and they'll start connecting all these systems to the Wi-Fi network. Well, even though the hotel may not be a bunch of technology people, it should trigger them saying, hey, all of my guests use an access code to access my Wi-Fi system. Well, okay, good point. TraknProtect is going to need this information as well. And I think by having 1 or 2 calls in advance, walking through the entire installation, you can answer those questions before the techs even arrive on site.
That's a great point. Yeah. And having those pre-install onboarding calls with the vendor and making sure the onboarding process is clear. Dan, were you going?
I was actually going to hit on the last thing that Bruce just kind of talked about. I think it's all about information sharing. And so he kind of covered all that, but when you actually get to that installation, almost every hotel has that chief engineer that's been there for 25 years. Somebody that knows it inside and out, knows where every closet is. You need that kind of local knowledge. And that particular person, yes, IT is important, and yes, talking to your cellular provider or your Wi-Fi provider, all those things are important. But let's talk about real nuts and bolts. How many people have gone building a hotel, have a hotel, whatever, and you go, oh yeah, the O5 rooms, that stack of O5 rooms, they all have that headboard that's over in the corner and the electrical outlets, in the bathroom and, that type of stuff. You need that local knowledge that pre-calls probably aren't going to cover. It's going to be on site. And so you need to have someone that can provide local knowledge is what I would say.
Yeah,
That's
I think back off of that too, is it a vendor that's actually coming on site, doing a survey and walking the space with the hotel team? But, I think from a selection standpoint, to your point, Dan, involve your engineer, involve your director of housekeeping, involve your front office manager, because they're all going to have insight and different points that, if it's a GM or even the director of engineering being the one that's supposed to choose the system, they may not think of all the other things that could affect the other departments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great points. So we're nearing the end, and I'd love to ask the participants to put in your questions into the question and answer window there. But I'm going to jump in this one. As you mentioned, Bruce, cost is number one. And the scenario is that everyone's reducing their workforce. Iris, you said, you have a lot less housekeepers now on staff than you did in 2019. And so, on one hand, you have reduced staff, which in a way makes it even more important to have safety buttons because the buildings haven't changed, right? The hotel is still a 483 room hotel. That doesn't change, but the number of staff changes. And that means that there's actually a greater safety risk to a certain extent. But we're also coming out of a pandemic. So in terms of cost, the budget constraints, and being able to prioritize certain things. How do you to a hotel that's struggling with this? How would you say that a hotel balance the needs between making sure the staff that is coming is safe, but that they're able to meet their budget requirements? It's a tough question, and we promised you tough questions.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of, I know IHG as well, a lot of competitors, it was a hard decision to push out the brand standards. So that helped a bit. Still, even though we pushed out the brand standards, I've still been talking to quite a few hotels as far as the, I guess the importance of it and why we suggest we do it now and not just do it just because it's a brand standard. Forgetting about brand standards is all about the safety of the employees that's in the room and stuff like that. And a couple things that we've talked about is depending upon the layout of the hotel, possibly reducing the number of devices going into each of the guest rooms. And again, every hotel is slightly different due to the makeup. If you're dealing out sheetrock walls, or I've been in older hotels with concrete walls, etc., maybe possibly you can get by with fewer devices in the guest rooms, maybe on a 2-to-1 ratio or something like that. That right there is a little bit of a cost savings. However, as I say that, it's important that that the accuracy in the testing is so much more important. If you're going to save money on those devices, and then the testing, you have to ensure that you're still deploying an extremely accurate system. So,
Iris, sorry, I thought you had something you wanted to add.
No. I mean, I think I agree. Where it's like, going back to Bruce, like, where can we, so to speak, cut corners, but still get, the accuracy at maximum level? And, with the Allegro, we have, 2 for 1 for 2. So it worked, but, to your point, it is an old building. We do have concrete walls, and it could have been that it didn't work. So, yeah.
And that's something we did with Allegro. Iris, as you know, we did a pay-as-you-go. For TraknProtect, we offer use the number of safety buttons. So look for vendors that are offering flexibility, is what I would say, that allow you to grow. So as you ramp up your staff, that you have the ability. I know, Dan, we did this with quite a few of your properties as well, where we said, have the safety button licensing for the staff that you have right now, and then even if that means decreasing the number of licenses, and then ramp that up as you ramp up your staff again, because that allows, at least there's some flexibility that can be then offered while making sure the infrastructure is in place, to Bruce's point, to cover the entire building, and that we can provide safety for the employees for where they are. It's a bit of a compromise. I mean, the infrastructure cost doesn't entirely go away, but at least you get a little bit of a break on the software licensing side of things.
I think the other part too is, that was something for us, we implemented the safety button primarily because it became a city ordinance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's like, what if that changes down the road, and now other departments will be included and not just, housekeeping, for example. And even the part of like, we've massively reduced workforce because of COVID, but we also reduced workforce, during slower months, in the winter time, it's not that busy in Chicago. So I think that's definitely something to consider when choosing a vendor, for sure.
So Victoria, before you ask your questions, I'm wondering if Barbara has the second poll question ready.
I have the second poll question I can launch right now.
That would be great.
And here it is. What would help you implement in the next 6 months? Multiple choice. Please log your answers.
So as you heard, this is between labor and budgetary constraints. Those are always considerations. So as you're looking at it, what would help you implement the solution? If you haven't already implemented it, what would help you implement the solution in the next 6 months? So we'll give everyone another 30 seconds or so. Looks like the same 4 people are responding. It'd be great to have other participants respond as well, since we have quite a few. There we go. We've got more coming on board. I almost feel like an auctioneer here. Come on, one more. Let's get a little bit more.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and share the results.
So 40% said approval from corporate, 40 said other, and it'd be great to understand those. If you're able to share that, that'd be great. Or more staff support, and that's really interesting. So that's great information. Victoria, I know we have a few minutes left, so why don't I make sure we get to the questions that the audience had.
Sure. So we have a question that came in, and they would like to know, what is the #1 issue you've experienced with the physical installs? And Bruce said that he would take this one first.
Perfect.
So as briefly mentioned before, I think it's just the connectivity to the Wi-Fi systems. And again, every hotel or every brand is going to have their own different flavor of Wi-Fi infrastructure, et cetera. So I think just knowing that or hearing that in advance of the install, really focus on how your devices connect to the hotel's Wi-Fi systems and what kind of security do you have around that, if any. I know we do a lot of MAC address filtering, so we needed the MAC address of each of the devices in advance. So if we had all of that information up front, and then I think a lot of the installs could be plug and play. So again, just doing a little bit of homework up front. Again, whether it's an on-site site survey and possibly even trying to connect a single device during an on-site survey, not during the install. I'm just thinking about that off the top of my head now. But again, even just talking it through on a conference call with GMs and chief engineers and IT managers, if you have any or anything of that nature, really talk through and understand how TraknProtect or any system that you're deploying is going to talk to that Wi-Fi system. So I think just the connectivity to the Wi-Fi, doing a little bit of homework up front will ease that.
That's great.
Hey,
We're
Parminder,
questions are just coming in. Yeah,
I'm sorry, Parminder, can I ask you a question real quick? So
sure.
with your experience, and again, my experience is only with IHG, do you agree or disagree with the challenges with Wi-Fi? Do you go into some hotels and it's plug and play without anything, or is the homework for Wi-Fi a key, critical?
So we actually send out a technology guide, and what we do is we help hotels understand the security that we have and the fact that we need load balancing turned off, because load balancing is intended to, split the traffic between different access points. And also if someone leaves their computer on all day, all night, it's intended to kick them off. And that's where the MAC address filtering really helps. So when we say, okay, we need the load balancing turned off, hotels will generally ask, well, why? What are you trying to do? And then we can give them the MAC addresses to that. I find that given with the guide, it really helps them understand the Wi-Fi requirements we have, and they can ask questions. So, it's in 90% of the cases, if people actually follow the guide and look at all the different things required, we can actually, we can avoid about 90% of potential issues, but 10% can still be there, because we've had issues where someone's Wi-Fi just keeps dropping the signal, and it's because of the Wi-Fi vendor. And it's so easy to say, well, TraknProtect doesn't work because our customers aren't facing it, or it only drops off intermittently. And so, it's great to then have a conversation and look at, and we can provide data on how many times, in an hour your signal was dropped, which then actually helps them talk with their vendor and say, hey, what's going on here? Because I need consistent Wi-Fi in the property. So I think we help elevate that through any challenges that we face, because we're a client on their Wi-Fi. We can actually help them fix the problems that they weren't even aware of at that property. So Dan, there's a question for you. Have you deployed the LTE cellular configuration in a Hilton property at your end?
With White Lodging, we have third-party owners, and there is a third-party ownership group that is primarily Hilton's in our portfolio. And they have gone with an LTE cellular vendor. So direct experience, I'd have to say no, but I'm in.
Actually, I'm going to say, no, we did. The one by Midway. We have solar solution for a couple of your properties there.
Oh, which hotel? Sorry. Because they were saying Hilton.
No, it was the one where we did do the LTE. It's a Midway property. I'm trying to, Hilton.
We have one Hilton there, so I don't know. I don't remember, because I got thrown off by the Hilton piece. So
yes, no, we've done about, I want to say 2 or 3 Hiltons for you, and we have done the LTE deployment.
Well, see, I don't know everything.
I was like, wait.
Well, you know who I was thinking about. So,
yeah.
So I was thinking, because that was a difference of opinion on that one. But anyway, from what I hear on the LTE, including TraknProtect, it works well. So I'm more on the Wi-Fi, because I liked your integration into the Ruckus box, for example. So yeah. For me, that's the preferable way to go.
Yeah.
So forgive me for not remembering the LTE TraknProtect.
No worries. Just had to, I think my face dropped a little bit there when you said we don't have it, we have it with another vendor. I thought, wait, no, I know I've worked with you on that.
That's all right. If people are watching in monochrome, they can't see my face go red in embarrassment. So it's all right.
No, not at all. So in the last couple of minutes, we have a couple other questions. What's the one question you wish you had asked the vendor prior to implementation? Iris, any thoughts?
I've read the question even before you mentioned it. And, I guess the one thing I can say, because it was required by ordinance in Chicago, there were a lot of presentations from different vendors including Parminder, you guys
Mhm,
did one,
yeah.
I feel like in the Merch Mart, I mean, years and years ago, and a long time before we went with you guys. So I think I can't really think of that, but if the opportunity is there, you know, or if you can go, you know, to a conference where you can just look at different presentations, I think that helps too, because, you know, one vendor may present on subject A that vendor B doesn't talk about, but you can say, oh, hey, what about this, right? So I think that would be my recommendation, knowing that not every city will have that, where vendors are saying, hey, it becomes a city ordinance, we want to get in front of you, we want to show you what we have to offer.
I'll take a quick stab at that, running out of time, would be,
Yep.
are you using subcontractors to do the install? And if so, what are their experience with that product and their qualifications?
Sorry, was that a question? Oh,
No,
that's
that was
one
an
thing you
answer
wish
to
you
a
had
question.
asked. That was an
That's the
answer. I'm
question.
sorry. So one last question, and then we'll wrap up, is what are the brand standards? And I feel like this is a pretty loaded question with IHG, Marriott, Hilton. It's a pretty long answer, and Tina, happy to answer that with you. But Dan, quickly, with Marriott's, I'm just going to summarize it quickly here, that it's a 5-meter requirement, that you have to be able to get accuracy within 5 meters. You have to make sure you cover guest rooms, service landings, and spas and housekeeping closets. And also it has to provide real-time location.
Yep.
Is that a quick summary?
Yeah, that, and I think the timing, haven't they pushed it off to the end of this calendar year, or I know
Hilton is till, I think Hilton deadline is December 31st, 2021. Marriott is December 31st, 2022. And I believe IHG is also just December 2022, December 31st, 2022. So those are the 3 deadlines. And so happy to answer other questions, but Victoria, I'm going to let you wrap up. This was fantastic. Thank you, everyone, and great lively conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Parminder, for moderating this excellent expert panel today. And thank you to all the panelists. If you had a question that you wanted to ask, you can always email me at victoria.schaefer@hftp.org, and I will get those to TraknProtect to get those answered. If you're collecting continuing education credits today, please note that you will need to self-report your credit for this webinar through the certification tracking spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is available at the bottom of the HFTP webinars page. In addition, an email with CPE credit certification information will be sent within 24 hours. Please save the email for your records. Thank you to TraknProtect for sponsoring today's webinar. We will follow up with a recording link for this session to share with colleagues within the next week. This concludes today's broadcast, and we appreciate your attendance.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.